Hey y'all. So, this is something a little different than I've normally posted. I've been on a huge Pokemon kick recently, so I figured I'd take advantage of it and make a video of my top 10 least favorite Pokemon. If this gains enough traction, I'll do my favorite ones as well. The video I mentioned in the Exes Storytime episode 5 is still coming, don't worry, but I wanted to make this as sort of an appetizer for those who are sticking around for that and the Exes Storytime finale. Also, for a little clarification, I do not hate all of the Pokemon on this list. Yes, I dislike them all, but only the top 4 are Pokemon I genuinely hate. Number 5 sort of bridges that gap between dislike and hate, as I dislike that one a considerable amount more than entries 10 to 6. But yeah, just letting you know I don't hate every Pokemon on my top 10 least favorites list. So, here's an honorable mention before the main part of the video starts. Charizard. Now, before you come at me with your torches and pitchforks, let me explain and say Charizard is now nowhere near my top 10 least favorites. However, if I had made this video 2 months or so ago, he would have easily breached the top 5 on this list. Charizard and I have had a love-hate relationship since I was in high school, but now I've grown to love him again like I did in elementary and middle school. Yes, he's overrated and gets way more special attention than most Pokemon, but I guess it's understandable. He's iconic. Nothing wrong with being iconic. Well, with that out of the way, let us begin. Number 10, Stonjourner. Taking the number 10 spot and the very bottom of my top 10 least favorites list is Stonjourner. He's here because, frankly, he's one of the stupidest Pokemon designs ever in my opinion. His counterpart, Ice-Q, isn't a whole lot better, but I highly prefer Ice-Q over Stonjourner. Ice-Q will not be on this list. Plus, I like penguins. Sentient Stonehenges, though, not so much. Number 9, Hawlucha. My disliking of this Pokemon is more personal than Stonjourner. Firstly, back when I was a kid playing Pokemon X, I tried catching a Hawlucha to use because I had heard it was a powerful Pokemon from a couple of my friends. But this Hawlucha proceeded to sweep my entire team, save for my overleveled Frogadier, and I ended up having to flee because I didn't need to black out and end up losing my precious Pokédollars. I admit its design is decent, but we could have done a lot better for our first fighting flying-type Pokemon. Number 8, Chesnaught. Chesnaught is my least favorite starter of all of them. You will not see another starter on this list. Ever since the Kalos starters were revealed, it was very obvious who my choice would be, which one I would spam Wonder Trade to get and still be able to use, and which one I would be staying far away from. First of all, how does this become this? It looks more like a turtle than a chipmunk. It's butt freaking ugly. We could have had a cool, sleek-looking quadruped chipmunk evolution, but instead we got stuck with a bearded chipmunk tortoise homunculus thing. Chespin is cute, I will admit, but once it evolves into Quilladin, shit goes downhill fast. I have never and probably will never use a Chesnaught on any team. Only reason I had a Chesnaught back then was for breeding, and I actually hatched a shiny Chespin using it, as I used to be a shiny hunter in my youth, and immediately slapped the shiny with an Everstone. No regrets. Number 7, Emolga. Now, I'll be clear, I do not like any of the Pika clones except Plusle and Minun thanks to Pokemon Ranger. Pikachu is obviously not part of that list, and I also don't count the Meryl line, Pichu, or Mimikyu. Yes, they all have or seem to have correlation to Pikachu, but I do not consider them Pika clones. Anyways, back to Emolga. Originally, I was going to put Pachirisu here, but upon thinking on it further, I think Emolga deserves the spot because I at least have fond memories of Pachirisu from when I was a child. Emolga, I do not. Now to start, I don't like real-life squirrels at all, so that does not help its case. I also had bad memories as a child of Elisa's Emolga volt-switching and paralyzing my team to death so much so that I had to grind for almost an entire day to overlevel my whole team and actually got my Dewott to evolve into Samurott before rematching her. Keep in mind I was 9, but still. Not to mention this thing's 3D model is horrendous and looks hella disproportionate, and I really did not care for Iris's Emolga in the black and white anime. Number 6, Alomomola. Now, I don't hate Alomomola or dislike it much at all, but it's here because of its wasted potential of being Love Disc's evolution. I honestly thought when I first saw Alomomola back when I was playing through Black and White as a kid, that it was a Love Disc evolution. However, when I looked into this Pokemon further, I realized it was just a very similar looking single stage. Honestly, that's just sad. Love Disc is already hated by most of the player base as it is, and maybe it would be less hated if Alomomola had done its job right, or Game Freak for that matter, and made it the very much needed evolution to Love Disc. Number 5, Diggersby. Hands down, ugliest Pokemon. Just like I mentioned with squirrels, I've also never liked real-life bunnies or rabbits since I was a child. Lopunny would have also made the list if it weren't for the number 3 entry, but since this is a top 10 and not a top 11, Lopunny barely escaped this list. Bunnelby is honestly a decent-looking Pokemon. I had caught one to use way back when I got Pokemon X, but I remember boxing it because I got something else and wasn't really using Bunnelby at that point. Little did I know that decision was a great one, as I encountered a Diggersby in a trainer battle and immediately gagged when I saw it. What the f***, Game Freak? What is this thing? It looks like that one fat and drunk uncle that no one wants to see at family gatherings. Also, its ears. What the hell? This Pokemon is just downright hideous. There's no other way I can describe it. I'm gonna have to move on before I barf from having to look at this thing any longer. Number 4, Greedent. Remember how I mentioned I didn't like squirrels? Yeah, that applies here, but way worse in Greedent's case than with Emolga. This thing looks like a f***ing Disney movie reject. Also, the name, Greedent? Could you be any more obviously unpleasant? Though, hating squirrels and its appearance is not what made me initially start hating this Pokemon. It's that it jumps out of almost every damn berry tree in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Its pre-evolution is guilty of this too, but while I also dislike Squovette, it also barely escapes this list like Lopunny did. Making curry is one of, if not my favorite thing to do in Pokemon Sword and Shield, but since you need berries to make the curries, I'd grind the shit out of berry trees and encounter at least 2 of these motherfucking obese squirrels a day. This is by far the worst regional rodent we've ever gotten, and it'll take a really bad up to make me think otherwise. I hate Greedent. Number 3, Zangoose. The reason Lopunny was spared. This one's a bit of a wild card, as it would have never even breached the top 10 if this was made 3 years ago, but there is one sole reason I hate Zangoose. This Pokemon is my ex from episode 5, aka my stalker, that's a story for maybe another day, YandereDev's favorite Pokemon. Since I learned that fact, I cringe every time I see a Zangoose, and I can't even use one on a team anymore. I've also always been Team Seviper, so learning that makes my opinion on Zangoose even worse, and my love for Seviper even more validated. It also doesn't help that I can actually see the resemblance between this Pokemon and YandereDev. An angry and overweight, roid rage weasel-like creature just seems like the Pokemon he would be if he were magically reborn as a Pokemon. His favorite used to be Piplup, but I never hated Piplup or associated him with that Pokemon, so yeah, that's why Zangoose is so high up. Now, if I remembered my abusive ex-girlfriend's favorite Pokemon, it would be on this list too, but I just can't remember what her favorite was. I know she liked Mega Absol, but Absol was not her favorite of all time. Anyways, this is not about her, it's about Zangoose. Just like how I feel about my ex YandereDev, and what Conan Gray would say, I wish that Zangoose would stay in my memories. Number 2, Medicham. Now, my main reason for disliking Medicham is because it's just so f***ing creepy. I don't know why, but this thing creeps me out more than even Jinx or Mr. Mime does. And they're not even on this list! Probably due to nostalgia reasons, but I digress. While Diggersby, in my opinion, is the ugliest Pokemon, Medicham is by far the creepiest. It just looks like a goddamn sex offender. Not to mention, and this is my reason for hating it rather than just disliking it, when hunting for random shinies in the Ultra Wormholes, I ran into this thing way too many times, and having to see its creepy face just made me angry. I actually fainted like 5 shinies of this thing. Caught the first one for the Dex, fainted the rest. I love Hoenn, it's one of my favorite regions, believe it or not, but Medicham is one of the worst Pokemon to come out of this generation. Meditite is okay, though. And finally, number 1, Volbeat. Not only does this thing look criminally stupid in general, and also when compared to its counterpart, Illumise, but this one has a pretty lengthy story behind it, and this moment immediately solidified it as my least favorite Pokemon since said event. So, back in middle school, and a little bit into high school, I was an avid shiny hunter, as I mentioned before. I had an online friend at the time who knew this, and asked me to hunt him a shiny Marill in Pokemon Alpha Sapphire, since he didn't have the patience to do it himself. The route I chose to hunt on also happened to have a Volbeat on it. After about an hour or two, I had a good chain of Marill going, but then the chain breaks. Guess what's waiting for me on the other side of the grass? A Volbeat, but not just any normal Volbeat, a shiny Volbeat! I was so pissed off in that moment and so taken aback, but calmly messaged my friend asking if he wanted it, and he said no. I ended up fainting it as I had already had one at the time. This story, and just that it looks so goddamn dumb for what could have been a badass Firefly Pokemon, solidifies Volbeat as my least favorite Pokemon of all time, and it has been such for about a decade now. It would take an absolute bomb of a Pokemon, or an experience, to change my opinion on Volbeat being number 1. Well, that's all. Thanks for watching the video and listening to me rant about Pokemon that I dislike or hate. If this video gets enough traction, I'll make more Pokemon videos. If not, well, I tried, and I'll just keep doing storytime content, and maybe making Reddit content in the future at some point. See ya!